Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Packers Unscripted from Packers.com. I am Mike Spofford, joined, as always, by my trusted colleague, Weston Hodkowitz. We're coming to you here from our studios at Lambeau Field, and the Packers are getting set for a Week 2 trip to Atlanta. It will be a Sunday noon Central Time kickoff against the Falcons. And, Wes, this is a Falcons team that there's some excitement brewing down there. Not just because they're 1-0. I actually did read that at 1-0, this is the first time the Atlanta Falcons have been above 500 since 2017, which was the year after they went to the Super Bowl. So there is some excitement brewing in Atlanta. They have a young quarterback in Desmond Ridder. They have a young backfield duo in Tyler Algier and first-round draft pick Bijan Robinson. They spent big in free agency to get safety Jesse Bates from the Cincinnati Bengals, who made an immediate impact in his first game and a major impact in his first game for the Atlanta Falcons. Atlanta likes what they've got going down there, and this is going to be a very different and very interesting matchup for the Packers compared to Week 1.
Well, and don't look now, but you got Patterson coming back now too.
That's right.
He had the thigh injury missed last week. He was a full participant on Wednesday. It's a three-headed monster. And, what stood out to me most in that Week 1 win, getting too far ahead of myself, was the fact that the parallels between Green Bay and Atlanta and how they won those football games, right? Jordan Love made a few more plays through the air than Desmond Ridder did.
Yeah.
But they both played mistake-free football. And in a certain amount, they both kind of took it to their opposition. For Atlanta, I thought one of the things that was a really salient point that guys talked about in the locker room was the fact that, this football team, the way that they're built, yes, they're in this quote-unquote rebuilding mode, but they've drafted a lot of these guys into their scheme. And it's something that even the assistant coaches last night were talking about on Wednesday. The fact that, the offensive side of the ball, they have studs everywhere. They've built out their offensive line. They have 3 good running backs that they can all build off of. You look at the tight end situation with Kyle Pitts and, all these weapons that they have, Drake London. They've kind of fortified the whole thing. They just got to figure out if Desmond Ridder can be the guy that drives this car. But last week, if you win the turnover margin 3-0 and you kind of take it to a team and control the tempo of a game like they did against Carolina, that's the recipe for success in the National Football League.
Yeah, you said it with regard to the way both the Packers and the Falcons won. The two teams combined to go +5 in turnovers. The Packers won 2-0 in the turnover battle. The Falcons won 3-0. And Jesse Bates, that 3-0 was all thanks to Jesse Bates. He had 2 interceptions. He had a forced fumble. Those 3 turnovers led directly to Atlanta's first 17 points in the game, in a game that they win 24-10. And they were actually losing 10-7 in the third quarter when Bates got his second and his third takeaway that led to 10 points. And then the Falcons were up 17-10 and then added a touchdown late to put it away. Reigning NFC Defensive Player of the Week. They couldn't have asked more in one game from the big free agent investment that they made on the defensive side of the ball. And Jordan Love was talking about it after practice on Wednesday that Bates, he makes his plays. He plays what they call the post or the deep center field at safety, and he makes his plays by, reading the quarterback's eyes. For a young quarterback, Jordan Love, and last week it was a rookie making his first start, Bryce Young, for the Carolina Panthers going up against this Falcons defense. This is a game that's going to test Jordan Love's eye discipline. We've seen on the film how he made some throws last week where, he's trying to look off defenders and then throw the other way. These are the kinds of things that you learn in the NFL when you can sit for a few years, and certainly behind a quarterback like Aaron Rodgers. It's going to be a test for Jordan Love in that area, because if he gives anything away with his eyes, Jesse Bates is going to be there and to try to jump the pass.
Much better football team overall is what they're seeing this week. That was a great start against Chicago, but I think you listed everybody on Wednesday in the locker room. Nobody's resting on their laurels going into this one because they understand the threat on both sides of the ball. looking at Bates, I mean, the Packers have seen him before. A.J. Dillon even talked about in the locker room. He remembers being hit by him before when they played Cincinnati.
Yeah.
He was trying to get in an end zone. The kid brings it on every single play, and he gave them sort of a veteran edge that I think the secondary really needed. A.J. Terrell is probably one of the better corners in this league that nobody talks about. You saw some, I don't know if you checked it out, but like some of the PFF stats. I mean, this guy is one of the best cover corners in the league. But again, kind of like the situation the Packers were in last year in Miami, there's a couple of these corners that if they're not flashy and they don't really put themselves out there, you don't hear a lot about them. But Terrell's not a guy that you can, really look past either. Jeff Okudah could potentially be back in this game. You want to talk about hungry guys that have something to prove.
Yeah.
He's probably stands chief among that list.
Redemption story if there ever was one.
Yeah, and then up front, I mean, it's your typical Calais Campbell, with Grady Jarrett. I mean, just the guys that have been hallmarks in this league of defensive excellence for years.
Bud Dupree is an edge rusher. Just like Campbell kind of established himself elsewhere. Now, a veteran that's been brought in for this Atlanta Falcons defense as they've put some pieces. You mentioned how they, offensively, especially in the offensive line, they've drafted all these guys. Defensively, they've kind of put things together through free agency and picking guys up, and they're trying to to piece it all together and see what they have.
Yeah, and that's going to be where it all comes down to, and seeing what Green Bay can do, and if they can win in the same ways they won against the Chicago Bears. But Mike, I will bring it back to the beginning. You're not going to see a Justin Fields type runner this week, but it's going to be about staying disciplined against this multifaceted offense. I wish I could remember which guy talked about it, but just looking around and seeing first round pick, the amount of resources that they've invested on the offensive side of the ball, that's going to be a key, because even I wrote about this in Insider Inbox. Guys, they're going to see it here in a couple weeks with Gibbs, and they're going to see it in this game with Bijan Robinson. But when these guys figure out the full gamut of being a running back, they're going to be difficult to deal with, and it's going to be tough to get them off the field. Green Bay needs to make him look like a rookie in the areas in which he's growing, and then when he has the ball in his hands in space, whether it's as a pass catcher or a runner, hats to the ball again and making sure that they get him down.
Yeah, well, in that backfield, you have Tyler Algier, who was a 1,000-yard rusher last
Quietest
year.
1,000-yard season I think I've ever heard.
Yeah, absolutely. And he was just a rookie last year doing that, so he's a second-year running back. Then they spend the number 8 overall pick in the draft on Bijan Robinson, and just the highlights from week 1, and Matt LaFleur talked about it too. He makes guys miss. He's tough to tackle, and it's one of those things that, much like we talked about with Justin Fields last week, you have to have everybody rallying to the ball when he's got it, because there is a good chance he's going to make the first guy miss, and you have to have other guys there to help clean it up so that a missed tackle doesn't rupture into a big play. A missed tackle just means maybe a couple of extra yards. Those are the things that'll make the difference in this game. And it's interesting because as much as Jordan Love posted 123 passer rating, Desmond Ridder posted 111 passer rating, and those were the 2 highest passer ratings in the NFL in week 1. I think this game is going to come down to the ground games for both teams with what the Falcons want to do, and as you mentioned, getting Cordarrelle Patterson back from injury. If you can call a 6'4", 220-pound guy a change-up running back, but that's what he is. True. That's what he is in this offense because of how the style of runner that those other guys are. And then with the Packers, we'll see what happens with Aaron Jones. He missed practice on Wednesday with the hamstring. And we, the Packers had elevated Patrick Taylor from the practice squad to be the number 3 running back in the game last week. But I think there's going to be a lot on both sides that's going to be predicated on the running game here. And I'm not saying that the Packers necessarily have to outrush the Falcons in order to win this game. But when you see that the Carolina Panthers rushed for 154 yards against the Falcons, you have to find a way to do some of the things that they did in terms of the way they move the ball, but then obviously protect the football, because the turnovers is what killed Carolina. Yeah, and that's where Bryce Young got into trouble at that game, obviously the fumble as well. Cordarrelle Patterson, I have so much respect for this guy. The fact that he's in now, year 11 in the National Football League. I mean, we saw him in Minnesota. We saw how dynamic of a kickoff returner he could be, but he couldn't find his footing as a receiver. He resurfaces, he bounces around, he gets to Atlanta, and they kind of opened up Pandora's box a little bit. And now if they call it the Joker position, whatever they're referring to him as now,
I think with Robinson there, with Algier did last year, that only makes him more dangerous. And again, I was taken aback when I saw that injury report. I was like, okay, he's back at practice, and it's like, oh no, he's a full participant. It's like, okay, well, that's a little bit of a game changer here. So, yeah, but at the end of the day, as I wrote in our Insider Inbox column, it's going to come down to that turnover margin and which team breaks the other team's sort of streak here to start the season. It's making Ritter make mistakes. Ritter got to play a very basic football game against Carolina, thanks to the takeaways, thanks to his weapons that he had around him. Making sure that you can actually make him be more of a passer, make him try to make plays beyond 10 yards downfield. And from Green Bay's perspective, it's taking all the things they did well against Chicago and trying to elevate them now against the Falcons team that feels like it has a lot to prove this season.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to get to a few more keys to victory from our perspective, but I'll take care of some sponsor business first. Sirius XM NFL Radio delivers hard-hitting analysis and up-to-the-minute NFL news that true football fanatics need 24/7, 365. And at Cousin Subs, we have something for everyone, like our Wisconsin cheese curds, mac and cheese, golden fries, and creamy shakes, all paired with your favorite sub or sub in a bowl. Cousin Subs, 50 years of better. All right, so we talked about the turnovers. We talked about the ground game for both teams. Anything else that stands out to you that you would put on the list of the keys to victory for Green Bay?
I want to expand a little bit more on Aaron Jones because at this time in which we're taping this before practice on Thursday, we're not sure what's going to happen there. He did not go on Wednesday.
Yeah.
But, Mike, he touched the ball 11 times last week, and he produced 127 yards. 97 of those came in, I think it was 97, or was it 103? Came in the third quarter, basically 2 series against the Bears last Sunday.
He made the 2 biggest plays of the game offensively.
Yes.
The throwback screen for 50-plus yards, and then obviously was the receiver on the choice route on 4th and 3 that not only turned into a huge conversion, but a huge 35-yard touchdown. Those were the 2 biggest plays of the game offensively.
They really were, Mike, and that was without one of the top playmakers in Christian Watson. So
right.
Let's see how this week goes now. Watson also not practicing yet. Are they going to have one? Could they have either? May not have both. Everything kind of changes on its axis based on that. Now, Matt LaFleur, the coaching staff, probably has a decent idea of what their availability is going to be at this point. They'll be able to make a game plan work no matter what. But if you don't have him, then it goes back to A.J. Dillon. It goes back to a guy like Emmanuel Wilson possibly. Patrick Taylor, who came up last week.
Yep.
It becomes who's the next man up there that can help them make plays. And from a receiving perspective, Mike, you and I talked right before the show began. The Packers had the youngest team in the National Football League in Week 1, 25.13 average years age. Just a remarkable shift, obviously, in 1 year's time. Well, you want to use that youth. You want to use that upside. I mean, and Jaden Reed showed you that. Luke Musgrave, did you realize that stat that I think Josh Blank from the NFL put out? Luke Musgrave's 50 yards, relatively modest, output in that game. 50 yards was the most receiving yards by a rookie tight end in 4 years. TJ Hawkinson,
Wow.
who had like 121 yards his debut with Detroit. But 50 yards, just giving you a reminder, that's uncommon for rookies to be able to contribute in that way. Now, obviously, a chunk of that yardage came off of that broken play on Chicago's behalf, but you have to make the plays that are out there. And the Packers are going to have to rely on those guys. If Aaron Jones is available, fantastic. I would be surprised if he's playing 30 snaps or 30 touches, but you have to prepare like you have a team that is built to excel in different ways. And I think as good as that game plan was for the Chicago Bears, Packers are going to have to come up with something potentially completely opposite now for Atlanta.
Yeah, and the other thing that I think I want to touch on here too, and it's a repeat of what I brought up last week defensively, and it comes down to the tackling. And
yes.
We talked about it so much with Justin Fields, and yes, it was frustrating that Fields escaped so many sacks and all this kind of stuff, right? But that's what he does. I mean, that's what makes him the dynamic player that he is, and it's not easy to bring him down. It's not easy to sack him. And as I said before, now you have a guy like Bijan Robinson who is extremely quick and shifty at breaking tackles, and if Cordarrelle Patterson is in the mix, that's a power guy that is tough to bring down with one player. And there are going to be missed tackles. It happens. The guys on the offensive side of the ball are paid not to get tackled. That's part of the game, right? But I think the difference is, does a missed tackle become an explosive play, or do you have the guys there to still limit the damage when somebody misses the tackle? And that's the thing to watch defensively, because Matt LaFleur has talked all preseason long through the preseason games, the play style and the aggressiveness on defense. And the aggressiveness is not just about getting in guys' faces, on the perimeter at the line of scrimmage to play bump and run. It's not just about blitzing or whatever. It's about the pursuit. It's about the way guys go after the ball carrier collectively. And if the Packers can continue that kind of play style, that's how, when there is a missed tackle, it doesn't end up becoming a big back-breaking play. And if the Packers defense can continue that style and limit the missed tackles and take advantage of the opportunities that are there to get those guys on the ground, then I think you turn it over to Desmond Ridder, and can this young quarterback beat your young quarterback? And that might be what the game comes down to in the fourth quarter.
I absolutely love the physicality with which the Packers defense played against Chicago, because you're right, it is about the ball carry, but let's not even look at the ball carry. Let's look at where the ball is going. You think about that end zone play, that red zone play where, the Bears kind of telegraphed what they were trying to do with Cole Kmet. Kmet goes to the end zone, basically, initiates the contact with Rasul Douglas, and Douglas doesn't back down. He stays right with them. He ends up having a pass disruption there. He sort of neutralizes the only real threat that the Bears had towards the Green Bay end zone that entire game until, of course, the mop-up duty late. You have to be able to do that. And, with Jair Alexander, Rasul Douglas, and Darnell Savage, I thought had a heck of a game that probably didn't draw a lot of headlines. But, 10, 11 tackles and a TFL for -7 yards. I said it to you in the press box, Mike. A -7 yard TFL off a screen on first down is as good as a sack.
Yeah.
It doesn't get that little one next to your name on the sack column, but that's a huge play. And the Packers had defenders that were routinely making those plays against Chicago. They have to keep them coming against the Falcons.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the other thing that will be interesting here, because this is such an intriguing matchup, and last week's game, with the big plays by Aaron Jones and then the pick six by Quay Walker, the Packers turn that game into a runaway. If this one comes down to, late in the fourth quarter, you've got two very young quarterbacks trying to feel their way. Which one is going to be able to execute, to make the plays, to do the things in a, whether it's in a 4-minute offense situation or a 2-minute drill type of situation, in order to get something done. The other thing that I think will be really intriguing to watch in this game is Rashan Gary. He only played 12 snaps against the Bears. 10 of those were pass rush snaps, and statistically he was credited with 7 quarterback pressures in 10 snaps. Now, of course, when wind-wise, conditioning-wise, you're not getting tired at all because you're only playing 12 snaps over the course of a game. Your percentage, likely will be higher, but 7 pressures in 10 pass rush snaps, that's insane.
Have you?
We'll see where exactly Rashan Gary's quote unquote pitch count will be now in his second game back, and how the Packers want to handle that. They certainly rotated all those guys defensively up front, defensive linemen, the edge rushers. There was a big time rotation going on even before the late in the game when things were out of reach for Chicago. But if Rashan Gary goes from playing, say, 12 snaps to 30 snaps, how big of an impact might he have on this football game with the way he looked coming back in week 1? It's kind of scary to think about.
It is. I will say, and again, this is just to keep expectations modest, they're going into Mercedes-Benz Stadium. They're going to deal with the artificial turf. I would be surprised if it goes above 20 this week yet. I could see that being the case when they get back to Green Bay finally on their own turf.
That's a good point.
But that being said, Mike, I don't recall anybody who did more with fewer snaps than what Rashan Gary did. And I was so happy to see the NFL actually gave him credit for that pass deflection when they readjusted their statistics on Wednesday.
You got credit for, because
he deserved it. He broke up that pass.
Yeah, he broke up the play.
And the fact is that for a guy to come out and accept the role that he's been given, with the understanding of, hey, Rashan, we got to get through 17 games. We want you to get paid like everybody else. We want to see the big picture here, though, because I wrote about it last week, Mike. This defense is different when Rashan Gary is out there. There's a swagger about it. There's a confidence. And one thing that Matt LaFleur touched on that you also did too a couple minutes ago, and it was something I asked Jason Rebrovich, the Packers outside linebackers coach, pass rush specialist on Wednesday, the rotation that they had.
Yeah.
Preston Smith played about 50% of the defensive snaps. That's never happened, at least when he's healthy.
Yeah, he's been up in the more 80% range in most games since he's been here with Green Bay.
And they're willing to live with some of the mistakes that come with that. Lucas Van Ness isn't going to play completely clean football, but you saw what he can add with his speed and his athleticism. You saw with Justin Hollins, the veteran savviness. You touched on it, with what you might have missed. I mean, things that these guys do, to have 4 pass rushers all have over 25 snaps, and we're not even talking about Rashan Gary. That's what gives me a lot of excitement here about what they can do. Last week, Justin Fields, tough guy to bring down. Very interested to see if guys like Devontae Wyatt and Rashan Gary can get separation from their man and go up against a guy like Desmond Ridder, what they could possibly do with those opportunities.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting to watch. Couple other things to touch on before we go. First off, I want to get your thoughts on a couple of other Week 2 games, but I'd be remiss because I've mentioned it so many times in Insider Inbox. One of the things that really excites me about this game is I went to the Atlanta Falcons website this week, and they changed their background to the red helmets.
Oh,
they're going to be wearing the red helmets,
Let's
I think, on Sunday, the ones from my childhood. I absolutely love that helmet. I really wish the Falcons had never gone away from it in the first place. It's that red helmet with the black bird on it. I always loved that as a kid, and I'm actually going to get to see it live and in person in Atlanta on Sunday. I'm fired up. I'm ready.
There aren't a lot of things that actually show our generational differences, but this is one of them because you're absolutely right. It's a sweet look, but for me, I was a Michael Vick kid.
Yeah, sure.
So when I think of the Falcons, I think of just jet black, those black uniforms with the little, red tint, because that was Michael Vick running all over everybody for a few years. So I'm partial to that. But that being said, it is a good look, and obviously it's always neat when you get the alternate uniforms, whether it's Green Bay or the opposing team. When you add a different little extra flair to a matchup is always fun.
A little more spice, a little more visual to what's going on. Week 2, I think a big game. A lot of NFL fans in general, but certainly Packers fans will be paying attention to the Thursday night matchup. The Minnesota Vikings have an awfully tough task. They lose at home in Week 1 to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, a game that everybody expected them to win. They did not, and now they have the quick turnaround on the road at Philadelphia, playing the defending NFC champions in a primetime matchup, and the Vikings trying to avoid an 0-2 start. And then the flip side of it is the Detroit Lions. They're back at home now in Week 2. They're playing a Seattle team that lost at home in Week 1. And the Detroit Lions, while Seattle's looking to avoid 0-2, the Detroit Lions, much like the Packers, looking to start 2-0, and I think just it'd be really interesting to see where everything is in the NFC North after 2 games here.
So last week we had the Bears loss against Green Bay, and then you had the Giants kind of getting just ran out of the building against the Dallas Cowboys.
Putting it mildly.
But if it wouldn't have been for that, just speaking strictly on the field, not the Aaron Rodgers thing and the Jets actually winning that game, the Seattle Seahawks completely lay an egg against the LA Rams
at home.
And now you got a team that a lot of people was expecting to be playoff contender, top of that division. Now they got questions to answer right off the bat.
Yeah, a lot of folks were thinking that Seattle was really the only team in the NFC West that was going to challenge the San Francisco 49ers for that division title, and they lose a division game at home in Week 1 to a Rams team that was miles away from the playoffs last year.
Yeah, and it was close early on, but it did not end that way. And then for the Philadelphia Eagles, one reason I'm excited to watch this game at the time in which we're taping this tonight is because of Jalen Carter and the fact that this young man, I mean, there's a lot going on there. We know what happened with the draft and everything, but he's a wrecking ball. And that was already a really tough physical Philadelphia Eagles defense. I'm excited to see what he does against a Minnesota interior offensive line that hasn't been perennially known as one of the best in the National Football League.
Well, and the Vikings are dealing with injuries up front. Their center, Garrett Bradbury's already been ruled out for this game. And then at tackle, Christian Darrisaw, it sounds like he's been listed as questionable, I think, with his injury. So the Vikings might be down 2 starters on the offensive line on a short week, on the road, against a team like Philadelphia, and they're trying to avoid starting 0-2. It's a huge task in front of the Minnesota Vikings Thursday night to get a win and get in the win column in 2023.
Yeah, and then obviously for Philadelphia's standpoint, Jalen Hurts going back into that stadium. I mean, there's going to be a lot of positive vibes. I know they came up short, but they still got high expectations for this year. That Eagles fan base is going to be ready to go.
Yeah, I know we don't talk too much about AFC games a lot, but I just want to say I think the game of the week in the NFL this week is one that we're not going to be able to watch because it's going to be going on at the same time as Packers-Falcons. But Kansas City at Jacksonville, my friend. The Chiefs, they start out 0-1. Jacksonville, who was eliminated from the playoffs by the Chiefs last year, and they've got Trevor Lawrence and Doug Peterson's got everything going in the right direction in Jacksonville, and Kansas City has to go down there to try to avoid an 0-2 start for the defending champs. I think that's going to be a really intriguing game. I'm definitely going to catch the highlights of that one when I have a chance, maybe on the plane on the way back from Atlanta.
We got to go. We got to get moving here, but I want to ask you this quick because you knew him a little bit. Was there ever a team, we talk about being a quarterback away, or I was talking earlier about being like Christian McCaffrey away with like the San Francisco 49ers.
Yeah.
Was there ever a team that you think was more of a coach away, just in terms of getting the ship righted, than Jacksonville was with Doug Peterson? Because we talk so much about him with Trevor Lawrence, right? And Lawrence is starting to realize his potential underneath the learning tree of Doug Peterson. But just the way that team has played for the last year and a half now, they're competitive. And when they go up against a team like Kansas City, the defending Super Bowl champion, they're going to be focused more on the fact that, they lost last week. They're going to be disappointed, and they're going to come out hungry and guns a-blazing. Doug Peterson, you cannot say enough of what that guy has done there, just changing that culture. And very quickly, they went from a laughingstock in the National Football League within the last, 400 days, to being a team now that nobody wants to mess with.
Yeah, and a team that came back from 27-0 in a playoff game. I mean that team. I'm telling you, they absolutely believe they are going to win every single game. And when you come back in a playoff game from 27-0, it doesn't matter what the score at halftime is. They're going to come out and believe that they're going to beat you. That is the culture that Doug Peterson has instilled there, and they have the quarterback that gives everybody the belief that it's not just a bunch of happy talk. So by the way, Calvin Ridley too, still a pretty darn good receiver. Yeah, he can play.
Thankfully, the Packers don't have to see him this weekend. So
there you go. He's not in Atlanta anymore. So the Packers have certainly other guys that they have to deal with, and it'll be fun to watch on Sunday. So with that, we'll call it a wrap on this edition of Packers Unscripted. Be sure to follow all of our coverage of the team, and we will have everything for you from Atlanta on Sunday for the Week 2 matchup. It's all there on Packers.com. For Wes, I'm Mike. Thank you for tuning in, everybody. We will see you next time.